Their laughter died the second the doorbell rang. The thug's hand was still on her throat when her husband stepped inside, calm, quiet, and carrying the kind of danger that doesn't need weapons. One look from him, and everyone knew someone wasn't leaving that diner whole. If you're hooked in and want to enjoy this story, go ahead and subscribe, and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see where everyone's watching. Plus, tomorrow I've got another incredible story lined up, and you definitely don't want to miss it. Alright, back to the story. The lunch rush had just ended when the diner fell into a silence so heavy it felt like the air before a storm. Debbie Alvarez stood frozen behind the counter, a hand pressed against her throat, where rough fingers had just been, her breathing shallow and uneven. The three men who'd walked in laughing 20 minutes ago were still laughing loud, cruel, and drunk on their own dominance. But none of them noticed the shadow that had just darkened the doorway. None of them knew who was about to walk through that door. And within the next 5 minutes, those same thugs who grabbed her would be the ones struggling to breathe, begging not for mercy, but for the chance to simply walk out alive. 30 minutes earlier, the afternoon sunlight had been pouring warmth through Rose Hill Diner's windows like liquid gold. The place carried that comfortable, worn-in feeling of diners that had served the same community for decades. Red vinyl booths patched carefully over the years, a counter polished smooth by countless elbows, the perpetual smell of coffee and home fries hanging in the air like a promise. Debbie moved through this familiar landscape with practiced gentleness. At 28, she had the kind of beauty that didn't demand attention. Dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, warm brown eyes that crinkled when she smiled, movements economical and graceful. Her uniform was always pressed, her apron always clean. She was the kind of waitress regulars loved, attentive without hovering, kind without being intrusive, someone who remembered your usual order and asked about your grandkids by name. Most customers assumed she'd worked here her whole life, that this quiet roadside diner was all she'd ever known. They couldn't have been more wrong. Debbie wasn't here because it was easy. She was here because she was hiding not from the law, but from a life soaked in violence she'd fought desperately to escape. The gentle warmth she radiated wasn't weakness. It was a choice she made every single day, a promise to the man who'd given up everything to build her this peaceful life. Her husband Lucas was rarely seen at the diner. Most people assumed he traveled for business, some vague corporate job that kept him on the road. They'd see him occasionally tall and imposing with dark hair styled back, neck tattoos barely visible above his collar, and an expression that discouraged small talk. He'd sit at the counter, drink coffee, exchange quiet words with Debbie in Spanish, then disappear again. Polite nods, brief conversations, then gone. What they didn't know was that Lucas David's name carried weight in rooms where business was conducted in whispers and blood. As Debbie refilled salt shakers, the door chimed. 3 young men walked in leather jackets despite the warm weather, cocky grins plastered across their faces, shoulders rolled back with the swagger of people who'd never been truly afraid. The one in front had slicked back hair and a scar cutting through his eyebrow. Behind him, a shorter man with a gold chain caught the light, and the third, quiet, watching, had calculating eyes that swept the diner like he was cataloging exits. "Yo, you open?" the leader called out, already sliding into a booth without waiting for an answer. "Of course," Debbie replied, her professional smile clicking into place. "I'll be right with you." "Take your time, sweetheart." The one with the gold chain smirked, dragging out the word like an insult wrapped in honey. "We ain't in no rush." Debbie felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the old instinct that recognized danger before her conscious mind could name it, but she pushed it down, approaching their table with menus and the same warm professionalism she gave everyone. "Can I start you gentlemen with some coffee?" "Gentlemen," the leader Nino repeated mockingly, looking at his friends. "You hear that? She thinks we're gentlemen." His friends laughed, the sound sharp and mean. "Just coffee is fine," Debbie said quietly, setting down the menus with steady hands. Nah. Nino leaned back, spreading his arms across the booth like he was claiming territory. "What if we want something that ain't on the menu? You gonna help us with that too?" Debbie's fingers tightened slightly on her notepad. "I'll get your coffee." As she turned, she caught movement in her peripheral vision. The quiet one had shifted, blocking the natural path back to the counter. Not obviously, just enough. Her pulse quickened, not from fear for herself, from fear of what would happen if they pushed too far. If they were still here when Lucas arrived. Debbie's hands trembled slightly as she poured coffee, the dark liquid swirling in the pot like a memory she'd tried to drown. The sound of the men's laughter behind her felt like an echo not of this moment, but of 1,000 moments before. Moments from a life she'd promised herself she'd never return to. She hadn't always been the gentle waitress at Rose Hill Diner. 10 years ago, Debbie Alvarez had been a different person entirely. She'd grown up in the kind of neighborhood where gunshots were background noise, where you learned not to look too long at what happened in alleyways, where survival meant keeping your head down and your questions to yourself. Her mother worked 3 jobs trying to keep Debbie and her younger brother off the streets. It hadn't been enough. By 16, Debbie knew which corners belonged to which crews. She knew which sirens meant someone wasn't coming home. She knew the particular silence that fell over a block after violence, heavy, guilty, waiting. Her brother Miguel had gotten tangled up with the wrong people. Not because he was bad, but because he was young and poor and angry, and those people promised him respect, protection, a family that wouldn't abandon him. Debbie had watched him change, watched the softness leave his eyes, watched him carry weight he was too young to understand. And then came the night everything shattered. Miguel had crossed a line he didn't know existed, disrespected someone from a rival organization. They'd cornered him outside their apartment building. 3 men with guns and cruel smiles, and 15-year-old Miguel with nothing but fear and apologies. Debbie had run outside screaming, throwing herself between her brother and the guns. Stupid, reckless. But she couldn't watch him die. The men had laughed. One of them grabbed her by the hair, said something about teaching them both a lesson about respect. That's when Lucas David had appeared. Not running, not shouting, just walking down the street like he had every right to be there, his presence filling the space like a storm front. The men with guns had gone silent. One of them had actually stepped back. Let them go, Lucas had said. Not a request. A statement of what would happen next. Debbie had never seen men with guns look afraid before. Lucas hadn't touched anyone, hadn't needed to. Whatever he was, whatever he represented, it was enough to send 3 armed men walking away empty-handed, glancing over their shoulders like they'd narrowly escaped something worse than death. He'd looked at Debbie, then really looked at her, past the fear and the bravado, and something in his expression had shifted, like he'd seen something familiar, something worth protecting. You shouldn't have to live like this, he'd said quietly. No one should. Over the following months, Lucas had kept watch over them from a distance, made sure Miguel stayed safe, made sure the streets knew the Alvarez family was under protection. He never asked for anything in return, never made demands, just appeared when danger circled too close. A silent guardian with eyes that had seen too much. Debbie had fallen in love with him slowly, then all at once. Not because he was powerful, but because beneath that power was a man who was tired of violence, tired of being feared, tired of a life where every relationship was transactional, where loyalty was bought and trust was a weakness. When he'd asked her to leave with him to build something new, something clean, something peaceful, she hadn't hesitated. I can't promise you riches, Lucas had told her, his calloused hands gentle against her face. But I can promise you peace. A life where you never have to be afraid again, where you can be soft without it being dangerous. What about your world? Debbie had whispered. They won't just let you walk away. I've earned the right to leave, Lucas had said, his voice carrying the weight of decisions she'd never fully understand. But if violence ever finds us again, if that life ever catches up, we leave. Together. No looking back. Debbie had made him promise. No going back. No matter what. We built this life together. We protect it together. Lucas had kissed her forehead. I will never bring that world to our door. Now, 3 years later, standing in the warm safety of their diner, Debbie set down the coffee pot with shaking hands. She'd believed him. She'd believed peace was something you could build and keep. But as Nino's laughter cut through the diner again, sharper this time, hungrier, Debbie realized the truth she'd been avoiding. Peace isn't something you build once. It's something you defend, every single day. And some days, the cost of that defense is higher than others. Debbie carried the coffee pot to their table, her professional smile fixed in place like armor. The weight of her past sat heavy in her chest, but she'd learned long ago how to compartmentalize fear, how to move through danger wearing kindness like camouflage. Here you go, she said, filling their cups with steady hands. Have you decided what you'd like to order? Nino didn't look at the menu. He looked at her wedding ring instead, his grin widening. That's a nice ring. Your husband treat you good? Very well, Debbie replied, keeping her voice neutral. The meatloaf is excellent today if you're hungry. I bet he does. The one with the gold chain, Carlo interrupted, leaning forward. But I bet he don't appreciate what he's got. Man who lets his woman work a place like this? That ain't respect. The third one, who'd been silent until now, finally spoke. His voice was quieter, which somehow made it worse. Maybe she needs someone to show her what real appreciation looks like. Debbie's jaw tightened. She'd heard variations of this conversation 100 times before, men who thought every woman was an invitation, who treated kindness like weakness. But something about these three felt different, more dangerous. Like they weren't just testing boundaries, they were hunting for them. "I'll give you gentlemen a few more minutes to decide," she said, turning to leave. Nino's hand shot out, gripping her wrist. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to stop her. "We didn't say you could go yet, sweetheart." Debbie's pulse hammered, but she kept her expression calm. "Sir, I need you to let go of my wrist." "Or what?" Nino's thumb rubbed across her skin, deliberate and invasive. "You gonna call your husband? He gonna come rescue you?" The diner had gone quiet. The few remaining customers, old Pete in his usual corner booth, the Martinez couple by the window, were carefully not looking. The silence felt thick, complicit. Everyone knew something was wrong. No one wanted to get involved. Debbie recognized that silence. She'd grown up in it. "I'm asking nicely," Debbie said, her voice dropping lower. "Please let go." "She's asking nicely," Carlo mocked, his voice dripping with false sweetness. "Ain't that cute? Like a little mouse asking the cat to play gentle." Nino released her wrist, but only to stand up, stepping into her personal space. He was taller than her by nearly a foot, and he used that height deliberately, looming. "You know what your problem is? You're too polite, too soft. World eats girls like you alive." "I can handle myself," Debbie said quietly, taking a small step back. But Vince, the quiet one, had moved behind her, blocking her path to the counter. Not touching her, but close enough that she could feel his presence like a wall, trapped between three men who'd turned her workplace into a cage. "Handle yourself?" Nino laughed, the sound ugly and sharp. "Nah, I don't think so. I think you've been playing nice so long you forgot what happens when nice don't work." Carlo stood too, completing the triangle around her. "We ain't trying to be mean, sweetheart. We just want a little respect, a little attention. That too much to ask?" Debbie's breath came shorter now. Not from fear, though fear was there, cold and familiar, but from the terrible knowledge of what was about to happen. She could see it unfolding like a movie she'd already watched. These men would push further, would touch more, would mistake her gentleness for surrender. And then Lucas would arrive, and everything she'd built, this peaceful life, this quiet existence, this promise of a world without violence, would shatter like glass under a hammer. "Please," Debbie whispered, and she hated how small her voice sounded. "Just order your food and leave me alone." "There it is," Nino said softly, leaning closer. "That little shake in your voice, that's what I wanted to hear, you knowing your place." His hand came up slowly, deliberately, fingers reaching for her face. Not a slap, something worse, something that would force her to flinch, to submit, to acknowledge their power over her. Debbie's eyes flicked to the window, to the parking lot beyond, to the empty space where Lucas's car would be. "Not yet," she prayed. "Please, not yet." But even as the thought formed, she heard it, the deep rumble of an engine she'd know anywhere, the crunch of gravel under heavy tires, the sound of her husband coming home, and Nino's hand was still reaching for her throat. Time moved like honey in those final seconds before everything changed. Nino's fingers closed around Debbie's throat, not squeezing hard enough to choke, but firm enough to tilt her face upward, to force her to look at him while his friends laughed. His thumb pressed against her windpipe, a promise of pressure he could apply whenever he wanted. "See?" Nino's breath was hot against her face. "Ain't so hard to be respectful when someone reminds you how." Debbie's vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. Not from pain, the grip wasn't meant to hurt yet, just to humiliate, to establish dominance. The tears came from somewhere deeper, from the girl she used to be, the one who'd sworn she'd never feel this powerless again, from the life she'd built that was about to burn down around her. Carlo's laughter cut through the moment like broken glass. "Damn, Nino, she's crying. You made the little waitress cry." "Nah, these ain't sad tears," Vince said from behind her, his voice carrying that quiet cruelty that was somehow worse than the loud kind. "These are finally learning her lesson tears. Ain't that right, sweetheart?" The bell above the door chimed. The sound was soft, ordinary, the same cheerful ding that announced every customer, every delivery driver, every regular who'd ever walked through that door. But the air changed instantly, like the atmospheric drop before lightning strikes. Debbie felt it first. The shift in pressure. The way oxygen seemed to get heavier. Then she saw Nino's eyes widen slightly, his gaze tracking something over her shoulder. His fingers didn't release her throat, but they stopped moving, stopped pressing. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Each one deliberate as a heartbeat. Debbie. One word. Her name. Spoken quietly, without inflection, without anger. Just a statement of fact. An acknowledgement of what Lucas was seeing. His voice carried the kind of calm that had nothing to do with peace and everything to do with control. The calm of a man who'd decided something, who'd already moved past questions into certainty. Nino's hand dropped from Debbie's throat like he'd touched fire. She stumbled back slightly, her hand flying to her neck, and turned to see her husband standing just inside the doorway. The afternoon sunlight behind him cast his face in shadow, but she didn't need to see his expression to know what was there. Lucas David stood perfectly still, his tall frame filling the doorway with an authority that had nothing to do with size and everything to do with presence. His dark coat hung open over a simple black shirt. His tattooed neck, usually hidden, was visible now, the ink seeming to move in the shifting light. His hands hung loose at his sides, but there was something coiled about him, something waiting. His eyes, those dark eyes that looked at Debbie with such gentleness, such devotion, were flat, empty. The eyes of a man who'd seen violence so often, it had stopped surprising him. "Lucas," Debbie whispered, and the word came out broken. Not because she was afraid of him, because she knew what this moment cost, what it meant. Every promise they'd made was about to shatter. Carlo was the first to recognize him. The color drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug. Oh shit, that's... "Shut up," Vince hissed, his earlier confidence evaporating into something that looked like raw terror. But Nino, either braver or stupider than his friends, straightened up, tried to recover his swagger. "Look, man, we don't want no trouble. We were just... let go of my wife." Lucas's voice didn't rise, didn't need to. Each word carried the weight of absolute certainty. "I already did, see?" Nino held up his hands, trying for a smile that wouldn't stick to his face. "No harm done, right? We were just playing around." Lucas took one step forward. Just one. The movement was small, economical, but all three men flinched like he'd pulled a weapon. "You put your hands on her." Lucas's gaze never left Nino's face. "You made her afraid. In her own place. The place I built for her to feel safe." "Look, we didn't know," Carlo started. "You didn't ask." Lucas took another step. The air seemed to compress around him. "You saw a woman alone. And you decided that meant she was yours to touch, yours to frighten, yours to hurt." Debbie pressed her back against the counter, her heart hammering. She'd seen Lucas angry before, frustrated, disappointed, tired. But this was something else entirely. This was the man he used to be. The one he'd buried deep, rising to the surface like something pulled from dark water. "Lucas, please," she began. He held up one hand, silencing her gently. His eyes never left the three men. "Now," Lucas said softly, "you're going to learn exactly what happens when you touch what's mine." The diner held its breath. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to dim, as if the building itself recognized the shift from ordinary life into something darker, something final. Lucas moved forward with the patience of a man who knew no one would dare run. Each step deliberate, measured, the way a predator approaches cornered prey, not rushing, because rushing implies desperation, and desperate was something Lucas David had never been. Carlo recognized him first, really recognized him. His face went from pale to gray. "Holy shit, you're Lucas David." The name fell into the silence like a stone into still water, ripples spreading outward. Old Pete in the corner booth went rigid. The Martinez couple by the window exchanged a look, and quietly, carefully, began gathering their things. Even the cook Miguel, Debbie's brother who'd been pretending not to notice the confrontation, went still in the kitchen doorway. Vince's earlier calculation transformed into something raw, pure survival instinct. "Nino, we need to go, right now." But Nino stood frozen, his bravado cracking like thin ice. "The Lucas David? From the Riverside families? That Lucas David? There's only one." Lucas's voice remained conversational, almost pleasant, the kind of pleasant that made your spine lock up. "And you're standing in my wife's diner, with your fingerprints on her throat. We didn't know." Nino's voice broke, the tough guy act dissolving. "Man, We didn't know who she was, who you were. I swear, if we'd known. If you'd known, you would have been polite. Lucas stopped 3 feet away from them, close enough to feel dangerous, far enough to prove he didn't need proximity to control them. Because power is the only thing that makes you respect people. Not decency, not humanity, just fear. He turned slightly, addressing all 3 of them now. Let me tell you what you did know. You knew she was smaller than you, weaker, alone. And you knew all 3 of you knew that grabbing a woman's throat while your friends laugh is wrong. You didn't need to know her name. You needed to be better men. Carlo's hands were shaking, actual trembling. Mr. David, please. We'll leave. Right now. You'll never see us again. You think geography solves this? Lucas tilted his head slightly, the gesture almost curious. You think you can disrespect what's mine and just walk away? Go back to whatever pathetic corners you crawled out of? Vince had gone completely pale, his earlier quiet menace replaced by the stillness of someone trying not to be noticed by something larger than themselves. We'll do whatever you want. Anything. Just tell us. Anything, Lucas repeated softly. He glanced at Debbie, and for just a moment, half a heartbeat, his expression softened. The warrior became a husband again, checking on the person he'd burned the world to protect. Baby, are you hurt? Debbie shook her head, her hand still pressed against her throat. I'm okay. That's not what I asked. Lucas's voice gentled further, just for her. Did they hurt you? Tears spilled over then, the ones she'd been holding back since Nino first grabbed her wrist. Not from pain, but from the weight of what was happening, the sound of her old life crashing into her new one. My throat is sore, but I'm not hurt. Not really. Something flickered across Lucas's face. Something ancient and cold. He turned back to the 3 men, and the softness vanished like it had never existed. You made my wife cry, in the place I built to keep her safe. The one promise I made her that she would never be afraid again, you broke it. For entertainment. Nino dropped to his knees. Actually dropped, like his legs couldn't hold him anymore. Please. Please, Mr. David. I have a mother. A little sister. Please. Please. So does Debbie. Lucas's voice could have cut diamond. Did you think about that when you touched her? Did you think she might have people who love her? Who would burn cities to keep her safe? Carlo joined Nino on the floor, hands pressed together like prayer. We're sorry. We're so sorry. You're not sorry. Lucas crouched down, eye level with them now. His voice dropped to barely a whisper, but every word carried like thunder. You're scared. There's a difference. Sorry is what you feel when you hurt someone you care about. Scared is what you feel when consequences finally find you. He stood, looking down at 3 grown men on their knees, and for the first time, something like disgust crossed his features. Now, Lucas said quietly, you're going to learn the difference between fear and respect, and only one of those will let you walk out of here. Lucas stood over the 3 kneeling men like a judge rendering verdict, but he didn't raise his voice, didn't throw a punch, didn't need to. The most terrifying power, Debbie had learned long ago, wasn't violence. It was the certainty that violence could happen at any moment, held back only by the thinnest thread of control. Stand up, Lucas said quietly. The 3 men scrambled to their feet, their earlier swagger completely evaporated. Nino's hands shook. Carlo kept glancing at the door like he was measuring distances, calculating odds. Vince had gone completely still, barely breathing. Lucas walked slowly around them, circling like he was inspecting something broken. You know what I used to do? Before this? He gestured vaguely at the diner. I made decisions. Life or death. Freedom or consequence. Men would sit across tables from me, and I would decide if they got to see tomorrow. He stopped in front of Nino. And you know what I learned? Really learned, after years of watching men beg and break? Lucas leaned closer, his voice dropping. The ones who hurt people weaker than them? They're always cowards. Every single time. Nino's breath came in short gasps, but he didn't speak. Lucas turned to Carlo. You laughed. While your friend grabbed a woman's throat, you laughed like it was the funniest thing you'd ever seen. He paused. Tell me, would you laugh if someone did that to your mother? Your sister? No, Carlo whispered. Never. I swear. Then why was it funny when it happened to mine? The question hung in the air like a blade. Lucas didn't wait for an answer. He moved to Vince. And you, the quiet one, you think I didn't notice? You blocked her path, trapped her. You didn't grab her, but you made sure she couldn't run. You're smarter than your friends, which just makes you more dangerous." Vince's jaw clenched, but fear kept him silent. Lucas stepped back, addressing all three again. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stand there, and you're going to understand something. Really understand it." He moved to Debbie, gently taking her hand and guiding her forward. "This woman, my wife, she survived a childhood you couldn't imagine. Watched violence destroy her neighborhood, lost friends to bullets and stupidity, and she chose kindness anyway. Chose softness, not because she was weak, but because she was strong enough to be gentle." Debbie's tears flowed freely now, but she stood tall beside her husband. "She asked me to walk away from my old life," Lucas continued, his hand warm and steady on her shoulder. "To build something clean, something peaceful. I gave up an empire for her, power that men kill for. And I did it gladly, because what she gave me, peace, love, a life without blood on my hands, was worth more than any throne." He turned back to the three men, and his expression hardened again. "And then you walked in. Saw her kindness as weakness, her gentleness as an invitation. You took the most beautiful thing about her and tried to punish her for it." Nino was crying now, silent tears streaming down his face. "We're sorry. God, we're so sorry." "You will be," Lucas said flatly. He pulled out his phone, dialed a number. "Marco? Yeah, it's me. I need you to run 3 names for me." He looked at each man in turn. "Give me your IDs. Now." 4? They fumbled for their wallets with trembling hands. Lucas read their information into the phone, his voice clinical, professional. "I want to know everything. Where they live, who they live with, where they work, where their families work. Everything." He paused, listening. "No, don't touch anyone. Just watch. I want them to know they're being watched. I want them to wake up every morning knowing that someone knows exactly where they are." He hung up. The silence that followed was suffocating. "Here's your lesson," Lucas said softly. "For the next 6 months, my people will know where you are. Every day, every night. You will feel what my wife felt knowing that someone stronger could hurt you whenever they wanted. The only difference? We won't, because we're not like you." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. "But if I ever hear that any of you put your hands on another woman, that surveillance becomes something else. Something final. Do you understand?" 3 heads nodded frantically. "Now get out of my sight." Lucas's voice could have frozen fire. "And pray you never see me again." They ran, actually ran, stumbling over each other in their desperation to reach the door, and then they were gone. The diner fell silent except for Debbie's quiet crying. The door swung shut behind the fleeing men, the cheerful chime absurdly out of place in the heavy silence. For a long moment, no one moved. The diner felt suspended in time. Old Pete, still frozen in his corner booth, Miguel standing motionless in the kitchen doorway, the Martinez couple halfway to the exit. Then Lucas turned to Debbie, and everything changed. The warrior disappeared. The judge, the boss, the man who'd just dismantled 3 thugs with nothing but words and reputation, all of it fell away like a discarded coat. What remained was simply a husband looking at his wife, with an expression of such raw concern, it made Debbie's chest ache. "Debbie," he said softly, stepping toward her. "Are you hurt?" She'd been holding it together. Had been holding it together through the grabbing, the threats, the humiliation. Had held it together while Lucas delivered his cold verdict. But that question spoken with such gentle worry, such absolute focus on her and only her shattered every wall she'd built. Debbie collapsed against him, her legs suddenly unable to hold her weight. Lucas caught her instantly, strong arms wrapping around her as sobs tore from her throat, deep, wrenching sounds that came from somewhere beyond words. "I've got you," Lucas murmured into her hair, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other pressed firmly against her back. "I've got you, baby. You're safe. I promise. You're safe." But Debbie wasn't crying from fear. Not anymore. She was crying because the life they'd built, the peaceful, ordinary life, where Lucas wasn't a feared name, and she wasn't the girl who'd survived the streets, had just revealed itself as the fragile thing it had always been. A beautiful dream that could shatter the moment violence remembered where they lived. "I'm sorry," she gasped between sobs, her hands clutching his shirt. "I'm so sorry." Lucas pulled back just enough to look at her face, his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. "What are you apologizing for?" "Debbie, what happened wasn't your fault. None of it. I almost ruined everything." Her voice broke. You promised you'd never go back to that world. And because of me, because I couldn't handle 3 stupid thugs, you... Stop. Lucas's voice was firm but infinitely gentle. He cupped her face in both hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. Look at me. Really look at me. Debbie's vision swam with tears, but she held his gaze. I didn't go back to anything, Lucas said, his voice steady and certain. I protected my wife. That's not the old life, that's just life. That's what husbands do. What men do. You didn't make me do anything. Those animals made a choice, and I responded. But you threatened them. Your people are watching them. Lucas, that's making sure they never hurt anyone again, Lucas interrupted, his jaw tight. That's making sure my wife can work in peace without fear. That's making sure 3 cowards learn to be better men. He pressed his forehead against hers. I didn't hurt them, Debbie. I didn't even touch them. I just reminded them that actions have consequences. That's not violence. That's justice. What if they come back? Debbie whispered, the fear she'd been suppressing finally finding voice. What if they bring others? What if this is just the beginning, and we have to run again and start over and... Then we run. Lucas said it so simply, so certainly, that it stopped her spiraling thoughts. If we have to leave, we leave. Together. Just like we promised. This diner, this town, this whole life, it's nothing without you. Nothing. You understand me? Fresh tears spilled down Debbie's cheeks, but these were different. Softer. I don't want to run. I love it here. I love the regulars and the routine and the quiet. I love the life we built. Then we fight for it. Lucas pulled her close again, his voice rumbling in his chest against her ear. We fight to keep our peace. And if that means reminding the world occasionally that you're not alone, that you're protected, loved, valued, then that's what I'll do. Every single time. Miguel finally moved from the kitchen doorway, approaching cautiously. Debbie, you okay, Hermana? Debbie lifted her head from Lucas's chest, turning to her brother with a watery smile. Yeah, Miggy, I'm okay. Those guys are gone, Miguel said quietly. For good, I think. Lucas nodded at him. Thank you for calling me. Always, Miguel replied simply. Debbie pulled back from Lucas, wiping her face with shaking hands. The diner slowly came back to life around them. Old Pete cautiously returned to his coffee. The Martinez couple quietly left, the ordinary world reasserting itself piece by piece. But nothing felt quite the same, because Debbie understood now what she'd maybe always known but hadn't wanted to admit. Peace wasn't something you achieved once and kept forever. Peace was something you defended. Every single day, with whatever strength you had. And sometimes, strength looked like gentleness. But sometimes, it looked like Lucas David reminding the world that some people were too precious to touch. The sun hung lower in the sky by the time the diner truly settled back into its rhythm. The adrenaline that had charged the air like electricity slowly dissipated, leaving behind something heavier, the weight of change, of boundaries crossed and lines redrawn. Lucas insisted Debbie sit down. Actually sit, not just perch on a stool while pretending to rest. He guided her to their favorite booth in the corner, the one where they'd shared countless quiet breakfasts before the diner opened, where they'd planned their future over coffee and dreams. I'm fine, Debbie protested weakly, but she didn't resist when he pressed her gently into the seat. Humor me, Lucas said, already moving toward the kitchen. Miguel, can you make her the usual? Already on it, Miguel called back, the sound of the grill firing up following his words. Debbie watched her husband move through the diner with practiced ease, locking the front door, flipping the sign to closed, pulling down the blinds with methodical care, creating a sanctuary, making the world small and safe again, at least for a little while. Old Pete stood up from his corner booth, moving slowly on arthritic knees. He'd been a regular since before Debbie and Lucas bought the place, a retired trucker who'd seen more of America's underbelly than most people could imagine. He understood things without needing them explained. Miss Debbie, he said quietly, pausing by their booth. You take whatever time you need. This place'll be here when you're ready. Debbie's throat tightened. Thank you, Pete. The old man nodded at Lucas, not with fear, but with respect, with recognition of a man who'd done what needed doing. Then he left, the bell chiming softly behind him. Lucas returned with a glass of water, setting it in front of Debbie before sliding into the booth across from her. The afternoon light filtering through the blinds cast stripes across his face, highlighting the tension still held in his jaw, the concern etched around his eyes. "Talk to me," he said quietly. Debbie wrapped both hands around the water glass, needing something solid to hold. "What is there to say? 3 guys came in looking for trouble. They found it." "That's not what I mean." Lucas reached across the table, covering her hands with one of his own. "Talk to me about what you're feeling, really feeling, not what you think I need to hear." Debbie stared at their joined hands, his scarred and calloused from a life of violence he'd tried to leave behind, hers smaller but no less marked by survival. "I'm angry," she finally said. Lucas waited. "I'm angry that they thought they could touch me like that my kindness looked like weakness to them, that being gentle, being soft, being nice, all the things I fought so hard to become, made them think I was prey." Her voice shook, but she pushed through. "I'm angry that for 5 minutes, they made me feel 15 again, powerless, small, afraid." "You have every right to be angry," Lucas said firmly. "But I'm also—" Debbie's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "I'm also angry at myself, for freezing, for not fighting back, for just standing there while he grabbed my throat and waiting for you to save me like some damsel in a story." Lucas's grip on her hands tightened. "Debbie, look at me." She raised her eyes reluctantly. "You didn't freeze because you're weak. You froze because you're human. Because you were outnumbered and overpowered, and trying to de-escalate a dangerous situation." His voice carried absolute conviction. "And you weren't waiting for me to save you. You were trying to protect them from me. There's a difference." Debbie blinked, tears threatening again. "What?" "I know you, baby. I know how your mind works." Lucas's thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. "You were scared, yeah. But you were also calculating, trying to figure out how to get them to leave before I showed up. Because you knew what would happen if they were still here when I walked through that door." He was right. God help her. He was right. Even in her fear, part of her brain had been counting minutes, calculating Lucas's usual arrival time, praying the thugs would get bored and leave before violence became inevitable. "I don't know if that makes me smart or stupid," Debbie said with a bitter laugh. "It makes you you," Lucas replied simply. "It makes you the woman who believes in second chances, who thinks people can be better than their worst moments, who fights for peace even when peace doesn't fight back." He paused, his expression growing more serious. "But Debbie, you need to understand something. That compassion, that hope, it's beautiful. It's one of the reasons I love you, but it's also something people will try to exploit, and I won't let that happen." Miguel emerged from the kitchen carrying a plate grilled cheese and tomato soup, Debbie's comfort meal since childhood. He set it down gently, squeezed her shoulder, and disappeared back into the kitchen without a word. Sometimes her brother understood exactly what she needed: presence without pressure, love without questions. Debbie picked up half the sandwich but didn't eat, just held it. "What happens now?" "Now?" Lucas leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "Now we decide what we want. Do we stay? Do we go? Do we pretend this didn't happen? Or do we acknowledge that our peace has a price?" "I don't want to leave," Debbie said immediately. "This is our home, our dream. I won't let 3 idiots take that from us. I won't let." "Okay." Lucas nodded slowly. "Then we stay. But we stay smart. We make changes." "What kind of changes?" "Security cameras," Lucas said, ticking items off mentally. "Better lighting in the parking lot. Maybe I start spending more time here during your shifts instead of working from home." He met her eyes. "And you start carrying the panic button I've been asking you to carry for 6 months. Debbie had resisted the panic button, a small device that would alert Lucas and several of his former associates if she pressed it. It had felt like admitting defeat, like accepting that violence was inevitable. Now it felt like common sense. "Okay," she agreed quietly. "Okay?" Lucas raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Okay," Debbie repeated. "You're right. I've been thinking about peace like it's something that just exists, if we want it badly enough, but it's not. It's something we have to protect. Actively, constantly." Lucas reached across the table again, this time cupping her cheek. "You're not giving up on peace, baby. You're just learning to guard it better. There's a difference." "Is there?" Debbie leaned into his touch. "Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like we're sliding back toward the life we ran from." "No." Lucas's voice was firm. "The life we ran from was about power for its own sake, about respect earned through fear. What happened today, this was about protecting what we love. About setting boundaries. About making it clear that kindness doesn't mean defenseless. He paused, his expression softening. I didn't hurt those men, Debbie. I didn't even threaten to hurt them. I just made them understand consequences. That's not the old life. That's just being a responsible adult. Debbie wanted to believe him. Wanted to accept the distinction he was drawing between protection and violence, between justice and revenge. Maybe he was right. Maybe there was a difference between the Lucas who'd built an empire on fear and the Lucas who'd simply reminded 3 thugs that actions have consequences. Or maybe, a small voice whispered in the back of her mind, that's just what we tell ourselves to sleep at night. Eat, Lucas urged gently, nodding at her untouched soup. You haven't eaten since breakfast. Debbie obediently took a bite of the grilled cheese. It tasted like childhood, like safety, like every time her mother had made this meal after a bad day at school or a fight with friends. Some comforts were universal, transcending language and culture and even trauma. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, Lucas watching her eat with the intensity of a man ensuring his most precious possession was being cared for. The diner felt different now, smaller, more intimate, but also more fragile, like a snow globe that had been shaken, its perfect little world disturbed, still beautiful but undeniably changed. Lucas, Debbie said eventually. Yeah, baby, thank you. The words felt inadequate, but she meant them with everything she had. For coming when you did, for handling it the way you did, for not becoming the man you used to be. Lucas stood, moving around to her side of the booth. He slid in next to her, pulling her against his chest, and she went willingly, curling into his warmth like a child seeking shelter. I'll always come for you, he murmured into her hair. Always. No matter what I'm doing, where I am, or what it costs. You call, I come. That's not negotiable. Debbie closed her eyes, listening to the steady beat of his heart. I know. And I'll never be that man again, Lucas continued, his voice carrying the weight of a vow. The man who hurt people for sport, who saw violence as a first option instead of a last resort. But I'll also never be the man who stands by while someone hurts you. There's a balance, and I'm learning to walk it. For you. For us. We're learning together, Debbie corrected softly. Yeah, Lucas agreed. Together. Outside, the sun continued its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The diner that had been a scene of humiliation and fear hours ago was now a sanctuary again, its doors locked against the world, its occupants safe within. But Debbie knew they both knew that this safety was temporary. The world had found them once. It could find them again. The question wasn't if, but when. And what they'd do when it happened. The answer, Debbie was beginning to understand, wasn't running, wasn't hiding, wasn't pretending that being good people meant bad things wouldn't happen. The answer was exactly what Lucas had shown those 3 thugs. Boundaries, consequences, the willingness to protect what mattered, not with cruelty, but with unwavering strength. Peace, she realized, wasn't the absence of conflict. It was knowing you could handle conflict without losing yourself in it. And maybe, just maybe, they were finally learning how to do that. 3 weeks passed before Debbie saw them again. The diner had settled back into its rhythm cameras installed, better lighting illuminating the parking lot. Lucas present more often, though he tried to make it look casual. Regulars returned, their initial wariness fading as days went by without incident. The town, which had buzzed with rumors for a week, found new gossip to occupy itself with. Debbie had almost convinced herself that Nino, Carlo, and Vince were gone for good, that Lucas's warning had sent them running to another city, another state, anywhere they could escape the weight of being watched. Then, on a quiet Tuesday morning, the bell chimed. Debbie looked up from wiping down the counter and froze. 3 men stood in the doorway, but they looked different. Nino's swagger was gone, replaced by hunched shoulders and downcast eyes. Carlo's gold chain was absent, his clothes simpler, cleaner. Vince stood behind them, and the calculating coldness in his expression had been replaced by something that looked almost like shame. Debbie's hand instinctively moved to the panic button in her apron pocket. Lucas was in the back office doing paperwork. She could have him here in seconds. Please, Nino said quickly, raising both hands in a gesture of surrender. Please, Miss Alvarez, we're not here to cause trouble. We need to talk to you. Just for a minute. Miguel appeared from the kitchen, dish towel in hand, his expression dark. You need to leave. Now. It's okay, Miggy, Debbie said quietly, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. She studied the three men, looking for signs of threat, of hidden anger, of anything that suggested this was some kind of revenge play. But all she saw was discomfort, shame, and something that looked genuinely like remorse. You have 1 minute, Debbie said, her hand still touching the panic button. Say what you came to say. Nino stepped forward slightly, careful to maintain distance. We came to apologize. Really apologize. Not the scared bullshit we said when your husband was here. We've had 3 weeks to think about what we did. 3 weeks of knowing someone's watching us, knowing that we could have, his voice cracked, that we hurt someone who didn't deserve it. And we're sorry. Genuinely, truly sorry. Carlo nodded emphatically. We were pieces of shit. Are pieces of shit. But we're trying to be better. Debbie's grip on the panic button didn't loosen. Why should I believe you? People say they're sorry all the time. It doesn't mean anything if you haven't changed. We have changed, Vince said, speaking for the first time. His voice was quieter than she remembered, less calculating. After that day, Carlo's mom asked him what was wrong, why he was so shaken up, and he told her, everything. What we did, what happened. Carlo flinched at the memory. She cried. My mom actually cried. Told me she didn't raise me to be a man who hurts women, that my father who died when I was young would be ashamed. He looked directly at Debbie. That broke something in me, in all of us. We started volunteering, Nino added quickly, at the community center, helping with the youth programs, trying to be the kind of men we should have been raised to be. It's not much, and it doesn't undo what we did. But we're trying, Vince finished. And we wanted you to know that. Wanted you to know that what your husband did, scaring us, making us understand consequences, it worked. We're not the same guys who walked in here 3 weeks ago. Debbie studied them for a long moment. She'd learned, growing up in the streets, how to read people, how to tell the difference between genuine remorse and manipulation. These three. They looked genuinely changed. Smaller, somehow. More human. What do you want from me? Debbie asked finally. Forgiveness? Absolution? Because I'm not sure I can give you that. We don't want anything, Nino said. We just wanted you to know. Wanted you to hear us say it when we weren't being threatened. When your husband wasn't standing behind you with murder in his eyes. We wanted you to know that we heard you. That line you said, I'm not as easy to push around as I might look. We hear it now. We understand what you meant. The office door opened, and Lucas stepped out. His expression went cold the moment he saw who was standing in his diner. Get out, Lucas said, his voice flat and dangerous. Now. Lucas, wait, Debbie said, surprising herself. They came to apologize. I don't care if they came to canonize you as a saint, Lucas replied, not taking his eyes off the three men. They don't get to be here. They don't get to ask for your forgiveness or understanding or anything else. They lost that right when they put hands on you. They're trying to be better, Debbie said softly, moving around the counter to stand beside her husband. Isn't that what we wanted? For them to learn? To change? Lucas's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the skin. Learning doesn't require showing up at the place where they hurt you. Nino took a step back. Mr. David, we're sorry. To both of you. We'll go. We just wanted. I know what you wanted, Lucas interrupted. You wanted to feel better about yourselves. To have someone tell you that you're not bad people. That one good deed erases 3 weeks of nightmares you gave my wife. His expression was carved from ice. But that's not how this works. You don't get closure. You don't get to move on until she does. And right now, standing in this doorway, you're making her relive the worst day of her life. Debbie's hand found Lucas's, their fingers intertwining. She realized, with some surprise, that Lucas was right. Having them here, even contrite and apologetic, was bringing everything back. The fear, the helplessness, the feeling of fingers against her throat. But she also realized something else. Forgiveness wasn't about them. It was about her. I accept your apology, Debbie said clearly. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve to let go of what you did. To stop giving you power over my peace. She squeezed Lucas's hand. But my husband is right. You don't get to show up here. This is my safe place, and you've already violated it once. If you're really trying to be better men, respect that boundary. The three men nodded, genuine understanding crossing their faces. There is one thing, Debbie added, surprising even herself. The community center you mentioned. The youth programs. I know the woman who runs those Maria Santos. She's good people. If you're serious about helping, about being better, then prove it. Show up every week. Be consistent. Be the kind of men those kids can look up to. We will, Carlo said fervently. I promise, every week. And, Debbie continued, her voice growing stronger, if you ever see someone else doing what you did, treating a woman like she's less than human, using power to humiliate or hurt you, stop it. You remember how small you felt when consequences found you, and you make sure other people don't have to feel that way. You become the intervention you needed. We will, Nino echoed. I swear to God, we will. Vince nodded silently, his eyes glistening. Lucas stepped forward, and all three men tensed. But he didn't threaten. He simply said, my people are still watching. They'll keep watching. Not to hurt you, to verify. To make sure this change is real. And if it is... He paused, something almost like approval flickering across his face. Then maybe there's hope for you after all. Thank you, Vince whispered, for giving us a chance to be better. Don't thank me, Lucas replied flatly. Thank my wife. She's the one with the generous heart. I'd have been content to let you rot. The three men nodded one final time and turned to leave. But before they reached the door, Debbie called out. Wait. They froze. Debbie moved to the register, pulled out 3 of the diner's business cards, and walked over to hand them one each. This has the community center's number on the back. Maria's expecting troubled kids, not grown men trying to make amends, but I'll call her. Tell her you're coming, that you have something to prove. Nino took the card like it was something precious. We won't let you down. You already did, Debbie said simply. Now you get to decide if that's who you stay, or if you become something better. They left then, the bell chiming behind them with its same cheerful innocence. Miguel came out from the kitchen, where he'd been hovering protectively. You think they mean it? The change? I don't know, Debbie admitted, returning to Lucas's side. But I think they want to mean it, and sometimes that's where change starts. Lucas wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her close. You're too good for this world, you know that? No, Debbie said, leaning her head against his shoulder. I just know what it's like to need a second chance. What it's like to want to be better than your worst moment. She looked up at him. Someone once gave me that chance. Helped me escape a life of violence and build something beautiful. The least I can do is pay that forward. Lucas kissed the top of her head, saying nothing, but his embrace said everything. Outside, the 3 men climbed into their car. They'd come seeking forgiveness and left with something better. A purpose, a path forward, a chance to prove that people could change, that one terrible act didn't have to define them forever. Whether they'd take that chance remained to be seen. But inside Rose Hill Diner, Debbie felt something shift. A weight she hadn't realized she'd been carrying, the weight of being a victim, of being someone to whom something terrible had happened, began to lift. She wasn't just the woman who'd been grabbed and humiliated. She was the woman who'd faced her attackers and offered them a path to redemption. She was the woman strong enough to forgive without forgetting, to offer grace without sacrificing boundaries. And that, Debbie realized, was a different kind of power altogether. 6 months later, the morning sun painted Rose Hill Diner in shades of amber and gold. Debbie moved through the familiar space with the ease of someone who'd claimed every inch of it as home. The coffee was fresh, the grill already warming, the morning light streaming through windows that had been cleaned just the day before. Everything was exactly as it should be. But somehow, it all felt different, better, deeper. Lucas sat at the counter, reading the newspaper and nursing his second cup of coffee. This had become his routine, arriving before opening to share these quiet moments with his wife, where the world was just the 2 of them and the possibilities of a new day. Maria called yesterday, Debbie said, refilling his cup. Those 3 guys, Nino, Carlo, and Vince, they've been showing up every single week. Haven't missed once. She says they're actually good with the kids, patient, present. Lucas looked up from his paper, one eyebrow raised. Yeah? Marco's report said the same. They've been clean. No trouble. Jobs, volunteer work, even started taking classes at the community college. You still have people watching them? Debbie asked, though she already knew the answer. Of course, Lucas replied without apology. Trust, but verify. That's how you make sure change is real, not just performance. Debbie smiled slightly, coming around the counter to stand beside him. You know what I think? I think you're secretly proud of them, that they took your lesson and actually learned from it. I think, Lucas said carefully, that I'm grateful they didn't force me to do something we both would have regretted. He set down his coffee and pulled her close. That day could have gone a lot differently, could have ended with blood instead of words. And I'm glad for your sake, for mine, that it didn't. Me too, Debbie admitted, resting her head against his shoulder. I keep thinking about it, though, about how close we came to losing everything. Our peace, our promise to each other, this life. But we didn't lose it, Lucas pointed out gently. We protected it. There's a difference. The bell above the door chimed, and Miguel walked in, carrying a box of fresh produce from the morning market. Morning, lovebirds. Some of us have actual work to do. You're not even officially open yet, Lucas called back. Yeah, well, food doesn't prep itself, Miguel replied, disappearing into the kitchen. And Debbie, your produce guy says the tomatoes are perfect this week. He set aside the best ones for you. Debbie smiled at that. In the months since the incident, the whole town had seemed to rally around the diner in subtle ways. Better produce, regulars coming more frequently, new customers showing up, saying they'd heard this was the place with the best coffee and the kindest service in 3 counties. The diner had become more than just a business. It had become a symbol of something: resilience, maybe, or the idea that kindness didn't mean weakness, that you could be soft and still be strong. That peace was worth fighting for. Can I ask you something? Debbie said, looking up at Lucas. Always. Do you ever regret it, walking away from your old life for this? For me? For the diner? For a world where the most exciting thing that happens is running out of pie on a Sunday? Lucas was quiet for a moment, considering the question with the seriousness it deserved. Then he cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones with infinite tenderness. Every empire I ever built, every bit of power I ever held, every moment when men feared my name, none of it made me feel as rich as waking up next to you does. None of it gave me the peace I feel when you laugh at something silly, or the pride I feel watching you turn strangers into regulars with just your warmth. He pressed his forehead against hers. I don't regret a single second. I'd do it again. Choose you again. Build this life again. Every time. Debbie's eyes filled with tears, the good kind, the ones that came from being loved so completely it felt like more than one heart could hold. I love you, she whispered. I love you, Lucas replied. More than you'll ever know. The moment stretched between them, perfect and fragile, like every good moment in a life spent building something worth protecting. Then the spell broke as Miguel called from the kitchen. Are you two gonna help me prep? Or should I just run this place myself? They laughed, the sound light and real, and moved to help Miguel. The morning routine unfolded with practiced efficiency, Debbie slicing vegetables, Lucas handling the heavier prep work, Miguel managing 3 things at once, while somehow still finding time to tease them both. By the time they flipped the sign to open, everything was ready. The first customers were the regulars old Pete, who claimed the corner booth, Mrs. Chen, who always ordered the breakfast special with extra hash browns, the construction crew from the highway project, who needed industrial amounts of coffee to function. Each person was greeted by name. Each order was remembered. Each interaction carried the warmth that made Rose Hill Diner more than just a place to eat. Around mid-morning, a young woman walked in, early 20s, nervous energy, eyes that had seen too much too young. She reminded Debbie of herself at that age, lost, looking for somewhere safe. Sit anywhere you'd like, honey, Debbie said warmly. The woman chose a booth near the back, somewhere she could watch the door. Debbie recognized that instinct, the need to always know your exits, to never sit with your back exposed. When Debbie brought coffee and a menu, the young woman looked up with something like relief. Thank you. I heard this was a good place. A safe place. Debbie's heart clenched. She pulled out her notepad but didn't rush the order. It is. You need a minute to decide? Yeah, the woman said quietly. If that's okay. Take all the time you need, Debbie replied. Then, following an instinct she'd learned to trust, she added, and if you need more than just breakfast, there are resources. Good people who help folks who are trying to start over. No judgment, just support. The young woman's eyes filled with tears. How did you? I've been where you are, Debbie said simply. Not the same path, maybe, but the same feeling. Like you're running from something and hoping you find somewhere worth running to. She scribbled a number on her order pad and tore off the page. This is Maria Santos. She runs programs at the community center. Tell her Debbie sent you. She'll help. The woman took the paper like it was a lifeline. Thank you. Really. Thank you. Debbie squeezed her shoulder gently and moved back to the counter, where Lucas had watched the entire interaction with an expression of such tender pride it made her heart ache. "You can't save everyone," he said softly when she returned. "No," Debbie agreed. "But I can offer a safe place and a phone number. The rest is up to them." Lucas pulled her into a brief, fierce hug. "This is why I walked away from everything. Right here. This moment. You making the world better one person at a time, in ways I never could with all my power. We make it better together," Debbie corrected. "Your strength protects the space where my kindness can exist. I couldn't do this without knowing you have my back. Always," Lucas promised. "Forever." The day continued in its beautiful, ordinary way. Meals served, conversations shared, laughter exchanged. The rhythm of a life built on simple things. Good food, genuine connection, and the radical act of treating people with dignity. As evening approached and the dinner rush wound down, Debbie found herself at the window, watching the sun set over the parking lot. The new lights Lucas had installed made everything look safer, more welcoming. The cameras were discreet but present. The panic button sat in her apron pocket, unused but ready. They'd taken something terrible and transformed it into something stronger. They'd protected their peace not by pretending violence didn't exist, but by being prepared for it while refusing to let it define them. Lucas came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" "That we did it," Debbie said softly. "We built something beautiful. Something that survived being tested. Something worth keeping." We're still building it," Lucas replied. "Every day, every choice, every moment we decide that this us, this diner, this life is worth protecting." "And it is," Debbie said with certainty. "It absolutely is." They stood there together as the sky turned from gold to pink to purple, the diner warm and lit behind them, the world stretching out ahead with all its dangers and possibilities. Peace, Debbie had learned, wasn't the absence of threat. It was the choice to build something beautiful anyway, to plant gardens in battlefields, to serve coffee with a smile even when you knew darkness existed, and love real love. The kind that lasted wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic rescues. It was about standing side by side, protecting what mattered, and choosing each other again and again and again. "Ready to close up?" Lucas asked eventually. "Yeah," Debbie replied, turning in his arms to kiss him softly. "Let's go home." But they both knew the truth. They were already home, had been all along. Home wasn't a place. It was a choice, a commitment, a life built together, defended together, and cherished every single day. As they locked the doors and turned off the lights, Debbie took one last look at the diner, their dream, their sanctuary, their proof that gentle people could survive in a harsh world without losing their softness. Tomorrow, they'd open the doors again, serve more meals, make more connections, build their peace one moment at a time. But tonight, they'd rest in the knowledge that some battles are worth fighting, some promises are worth keeping, and some loves are worth everything. Hand in hand, they walked to the car, leaving Rose Hill Diner behind them not empty, but full of memories, full of hope, full of the life they'd chosen together. And that, Debbie thought as Lucas opened her door with old-fashioned gallantry, was the greatest victory of all. Not defeating their enemies, but refusing to become them. Not running from their past, but building something better from its ruins. They drove home through the quiet streets, the diner's lights fading in the rearview mirror but never truly leaving. Because some places become part of you. Some dreams take root so deep they become who you are. And some loves the real ones, the lasting ones. They don't just survive the storms, they learn to dance in the rain. Thanks for sticking with this story till the end. If you enjoyed it, you're going to love the next one. It's packed with unexpected turns and heartfelt moments. Click the image on your screen to keep the journey going, and make sure to hit subscribe for more amazing stories. Drop a comment and rate this story from 1 to 10. I can't wait to see what you think.